The sun hung like a burning ember over the wide Arizona desert, slow sinking but merciless, casting long red shadows across dunes and flatlands where silence ruled like a tyrant. The heat shimmered against the horizon, blurring the line between land and sky. A lone rider appeared, a figure sculpted by wind and hardship. Cowboy Jackson Reed. His coat was worn, his boots dust-bitten, his hat shielding eyes that had seen too many graves and too few reasons to keep living. His horse's hooves thudded against the sand as if marking time itself. He had no destination, only distance he wanted between himself and a past he couldn't bury. But fate, like a snake in the brush, waits for the unsuspecting. It struck when he heard it, a sharp sound slicing through the desert stillness. A cry, human, female, desperate, it echoed off canyon walls, too raw to ignore. Something pulled his reins before thought could interfere. He turned toward the sound, urging his horse into a run, dirt rising behind him like smoke. Moments later, the desert opened into a scene of destruction, a scorched wagon, wood splintered from force and fire, smoke curling into the sky like mourning spirits. Arrows lay scattered across the earth, black-tipped and cruel. Buzzards circled above, already sensing death nearby. Then he saw her. Pinned beneath the fallen wagon wheel lay a woman, Apache, her dress torn, her skin streaked with dust and blood. Her hair, black as a raven's wing, splayed across the ground like spilled night. Yet even in pain, her eyes held the fire of mountains that never bowed to storms. She was breathing, barely, but her spirit seemed louder than the silence around her. Jackson jumped from his horse, boots pounding earth, and without a word began pushing the wagon. The sun burned his neck, sweat stung his eyes, but he did not stop. With one last heave, the weight lifted and he dragged her free. She gasped, air returning to lungs uncertain of survival. She looked at him, pale skin, blue eyes, hands scarred from work, the image of the enemy she had been raised to distrust. Why? Her whisper cracked like a twig underfoot. And why would a white cowboy save an Apache woman? He didn't look at her. He simply wiped dust from his brow and answered in a quiet, almost embarrassed voice. Because no one deserves to die alone. She stared, stunned, because in her people's sacred law, a life saved must give life in return. And in her heart, something ancient stirred. Fate had chosen him, and she, Ayanna, would soon owe him more than words. Moonlight spilled like liquid silver over the Apache encampment, draping shadows across hides. Tents and sleeping horses. The air smelled of cedar smoke and earth, and yet the atmosphere trembled with tension as Jackson Reed stood among the tribe, a lone cowboy surrounded by eyes sharp as blades. He had followed Ayanna back only because she insisted he would die alone in the desert if he didn't, yet now, standing here, he wondered if walking into a den of wolves would have been safer. Warriors formed a ring around him, faces painted with stories of battles and loss. The drums were silent, but the air thrummed with ancient lore. Sparks cracked from a central fire, sending embers swirling upward like souls trying to escape. Ayanna stood beside him, weakened but unbroken, wrapped in the colors of her people once more. Her tribesmen stared, shocked that the widow of a fallen warrior had returned alive. And with a pale-skinned stranger, voices rose like thunder. Some cried that he should be killed where he stood. Others murmured curiosity. Why had the spirits allowed a cowboy to enter sacred ground unscathed? The chief, a weathered elder with eyes older than memory, raised a hand. Silence fell instantly, thick enough to choke. Ayanna lifted her chin. Her voice came soft, but every soul heard it, as though the wind carried it for them. She spoke of death embracing her beneath the wagon. She spoke of flames, arrows, despair, until Jackson's hands lifted the world off her and gave her breath once more. Every Apache knew the law carved into blood and legend. A life saved demands a life returned, offspring owed, so the future may honor the past. Jackson's throat tightened when Ayanna declared that sacred debt before her people. His heart thudded unevenly, because he hadn't expected gratitude, and certainly not this. He muttered, I didn't ask for anything, but his words fell like stones into a canyon, swallowed before echoing. Ayana turned to him with a smile that felt ancient, knowing almost more prophecy than expression. "This is not debt," she murmured. "It is the ancestors choosing a path. You saved the breath that will give life. I honor what cannot be denied." The chief stepped forward and studied Jackson's face, searching for lies, for greed, for fear. He found only humility, something he had not seen in the men who once rode with rifles to hunt Apache-like game. Slowly the elder nodded, a gesture that sealed fate. Jackson realized then that if he walked away, he would not only break a sacred oath, he would erase the only moment in years where someone looked at him as though he mattered. In the desert, he saved Ayana's life. Here, among her people, he began to understand she might just save his. Seasons shifted across the land like slow-turning pages. Though for Jackson Reed, time inside the Apache camp felt suspended, as though each dawn was carved from the same piece of eternity. He arrived a stranger, but each passing sunrise softened suspicion and turned sharp, glances into studied curiosity. Children watched him first, their giggles floating like wine chimes whenever he stumbled through, learning their language or lost balance while trying to ride bareback the Apache way. Women passed him at the fire pits, offering food without speaking, testing whether he understood that acceptance came not from words but from quiet dignity. Men observed from a distance, arms crossed, waiting to know whether this cowboy would prove predator or protector. Ayana became his compass. Her presence guided him more than the stars ever could. At night she taught him to read constellations as stories, how the sky itself was a map of ancestors watching over their children. He learned to feel the heartbeat of the land through her, how the earth released secrets to those who listened instead of conquered. Side by side they tracked deer through whispering forests, learned the rhythm of drum circles, and sat beneath cedar smoke, while elders spoke of spirits weaving futures from threads of fate. Yet there were nights when silence spoke louder than wisdom. Jackson sometimes woke from dreams, faceless ghosts calling him from a past he refused to name, only to find Ayana beside him, her hand resting on his, as if she already knew battles unseen still clawed inside him. No vow had yet been spoken, no ritual yet performed, and still something sacred had begun to bloom between them, something without language, unstoppable as dawn. When the day of union finally came, it arrived like a quiet decision written in both their bones, not forced by law but welcomed by breath. Beneath a sky painted gold by sunset, elders blessed the joining of two souls, one shaped by prairies and gunsmoke, the other carved by mountains and ancestral fire. Ayana's fingers trembled slightly when she placed her palm against his chest, feeling a heartbeat that once belonged to a wanderer with no home. Jackson's voice broke when he whispered her name because it tasted like belonging. Months later, as winter frost kissed the earth, Ayana held a newborn child in her arms, small, fragile, and powerful enough to change worlds. Dark hair framed a face that blinked open sky-blue eyes. Jackson stared, breath caught between disbelief and awe. Ayana smiled, tears glittering like moonlit rivers. "You once walked alone," she whispered, "but now, through him, and you will walk forever."